Good afternoon, Realtors. Byron King here along with Mike Christ. Today, June 3rd, 2021, you're hearing from one of your NAR Washington, D.C. advocates on NAR's efforts to protect your valuable independent contractor status. Nia Duggins is the Senior Policy Representative for Business Issues at the National Association of Realtors. Nia works on a broad range of federal regulatory and legislative matters impacting business operations for realtors. She also serves as staff executive to the NAR Business Issues Policy Committee. Prior to NAR, she has worked at various nonprofit organizations and law firms at the DC Superior Court in the United States Senate. She is a graduate of Bennett College and the University of Maryland School of Law. Nia, thanks for presenting today.
Thank you, Byron, and also to the South Carolina Realtors team. I just want to say thank you. It's definitely a pleasure to join you today and to present on this very important topic, which is protecting independent contractors and protecting this status specifically for realtors. So again, thank you for having me, and I will get into the presentation. Here is a brief agenda of what we are going to go over today. This is a worker classification issue when we talk about how workers are classified. We will also talk about real estate professionals classified as independent contractors and what NAR's work is on this issue. I'll also provide a federal legislative and regulatory update, as well as NAR's engagement and advocacy. We will also have like a question and answer period. So I do ask that you would please use the Q&A chat function, and I can make sure that I see all of those questions toward the end of the presentation and answer those. And then also I want to ensure that I share resources with you all today regarding NAR's work, but then also the several resources that we have available on our website on this issue. So I'll be sharing those as well. So what is worker classification and why is it significant? There are two major tests that are used most often to classify workers. This is the common law test, and then there's also the ABC test. The common law test specifically looks at behavioral and financial control that an employer may have over an individual to determine whether this individual should be classified as an employee or an independent contractor. And when we talk about behavioral and financial control, we talk about, does the employer control essentially how the individual works? Do they control the number of hours that the individual works per week? Do they control the manner in which the work must be done? And then what is that financial control element? So that's what we talk about when we talk about the common law test. The ABC test is specifically a three-factor test that looks at also how a worker is classified. And with respect to the ABC test, it looks to whether an individual is free from the direction and control applicable under both contract and for performance of service and in fact. So it looks at both the contractual relationship that an individual has with a potential employer or non-employer, and then also what services are at play, and really the nature of that relationship. Secondly, it looks at whether the service is performed outside the usual course of business of the employer, or is the service that's being performed in a particular context customary for this employer. And then also it looks to whether the individual is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, profession, or business of the nature as that is involved in the service performed. So is this individual in the same service line or industry as a potential employer or a person who may be looked to as an employer? So all of these factors must be met essentially for a worker to be classified as an independent contractor. And so these are like really the three factors that are used to determine whether an individual rather is an employee or whether they are independent contractor. These ABC test factors also help to inform state statutory supervisory and control requirements that are specifically imposed on brokers over agents. And if essentially codified at a federal level, it could make it more challenging for real estate agents to be classified as independent contractors. So this is a broad overview of this issue. Real estate professionals classified as independent contractors. Real estate professionals, specifically real estate agents, including realtors, have been classified as independent contractors under federal law and also under many state laws. Since the 1980s, under the Internal Revenue Code, real estate agents have been classified as non-employees for federal tax purposes and thus are independent contractors. Additionally, many state laws also follow the federal standard regarding how real estate sales people are classified as independent contractors. So now on to why we're talking about this issue. Recently, there has been a focus by the current administration as well as Congress to look at how workers are classified. I think a number of factors have caused this to be a renewed focus. I think one of the major reasons why the administration is currently looking to focus on this issue is because of the gig economy, with a lot of different types of startup companies, from many of the ride sharing companies to some within food service and in other industries. But this has been really the major focus. I think additionally, an emphasis on this issue has been renewed because of the pandemic, right? And so how workers were classified specifically also as it related to unemployment and other things mattered, right? And so that is why really there has been a renewed focus on this. There have been several bills in Congress that have been introduced that would adopt a federal ABC test under different laws. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of the PRO Act, which is the Protecting Right to Organize Act, which focuses on codifying an ABC test on a federal level, but that ABC test would be under the National Labor Relations Act, which looks at the rights of employers and employees, and for the most part encourages collective bargaining. So that again, this broad legislation is what we're seeing come up in Congress. We've also seen the ABC test included in other draft legislation that is related to reforming the unemployment insurance program. And so our concern primarily at NAR is looking at this ABC test and also looking at the potential spillover effect, in a sense, that it could have, right? So if this ABC test is adopted, there is a concern for the potential for increased litigation, and then also how this ABC test may currently impact the way that real estate professionals are currently classified. Although right now, with the PRO Act and other legislation, it's not a immediate threat, I would say, in terms of federal adoption. But again, there could be unintended consequences that we cannot accurately assess if there's federal adoption. And we also know if there's federal adoption of a new standard, that many states typically will follow suit. So that's something that we're noting and that we are aware of, and we are expressing our sentiments to lawmakers pretty regularly and often on this issue. So under the federal regulatory update, we know that under the prior administration, the Department of Labor issued the independent contractor rule under the Fair Labor Standards Act. And the Fair Labor Standards Act is an act that establishes minimum wage, essentially, and overtime pay for workers. Under that rule, it would have adopted an economic reality test, essentially, to determine whether an individual was an independent contractor or was economically dependent on an employer. So an economically dependent worker would be an employee essentially. And so that was a rule that we supported, that NAR supported. And we know that this year the rule would have gone into effect in March 2021, but it was delayed when the new administration came into office, and there were many rules that were set to go into effect this year across many agencies that were delayed, and then some have been withdrawn. With respect to this rule, the rule has been withdrawn. Actually, last month, the Department of Labor announced withdrawal of this final independent contractor rule. And they cited that there was tension between the Fair Labor Standards Act text and also the purpose of the rule. And so that is why the Labor Department withdrew the rule. So we know that it is likely that DOL will propose a new rule in the future. We know that some of what took place under like the Obama administration, they are looking at some of that guidance. The current administration is looking at some of that guidance to inform them on how to propose a new rule and what that new rule should be. So that is something that is up and coming and that we are closely tracking. NAR engagement and advocacy efforts. As I mentioned, we have been incredibly engaged on this issue. One of the major things that we have been doing is engaging with members of Congress and their staff to discuss the longstanding federal recognition of real estate professionals to operate as independent contractors and the importance of this classification. So this is something that we've been extremely engaged on. We've met with a number of offices on this, not just about the PRO Act, but more broadly, this ABC test and what it means, whether it is passed through Congress or whether we see it passed as a rule by DOL, right? So that is a concern. And if it comes up in other related legislation, we're concerned about it. So that's something that we're working on. We have engaged through by writing many letters to the U.S. Department of Labor, just really articulating the uniqueness of the real estate industry and the importance of protecting real estate professionals as independent contractors, and the flexibility that it gives not only to real estate professionals, but also to their clients. I mean, they are able to provide stellar service and greater flexibility to clients in many ways because they are independent contractors. And so that is something that we are constantly articulating and making sure that we inform, the administration and also the staff at many of these federal agencies on these issues. We also, have expressed, again, our concerns with what would happen if federal adoption of an ABC test were to occur. And we also made really protecting independent contractor status a major priority for this year's Realtors legislative meetings that took place last month. So many Realtor members are speaking with their members of Congress about this issue. Even as we speak on this webinar today, there are many conversations that are taking place on this issue. Also, NAR's Legal Action Program has provided funding to support state litigation on this issue. So there is active litigation that I'm not able to speak to today, but there are two prior cases that I can discuss briefly that looked at this issue, and both looked at whether realtors, should be classified as or real estate professionals rather should be classified as employees or independent contractors. There was a 2014 case in Massachusetts, and it was a case that we won, and that was a win in a sense that in that case the firm's agents were classified as independent contractors. In the second case, the case settled, and the Court of Appeals really denied reviewing the case in California. So we know that many states have been looking at this issue. Also, there have been NAR has supported mobilization efforts in primarily New Jersey on this issue with respect to recent legislation that would mirror California's AB 5 when we look to how independent contractors, or how real estate professionals rather, are classified. So that specifically is something that we have been engaged in. One of the things that we also have constantly been asking, whether it be on a state or federal level, is that if there are changes to laws with respect to how workers are classified, that there be a carve out specifically for real estate professionals, as there is in the Internal Revenue Code. So whether it be on a federal level or a state level, we are trying to encourage that there be a carve out and there be an exemption specifically for real estate professionals. So with that, I will hop into Q&A. I do see that there may be some questions here. And so I just wanted to see if you all have questions. Let's see. Okay, so I don't see any questions. I will look in the chat as well to see if we have any questions. I'm sure some folks will watch this at a later time. And if you have questions, I will share the presentation as well as the slide deck so that you're able to ask any questions that you may have with respect to this issue, and follow up with me if you have questions down the line. Since I don't see any questions at this time, I will share the resources. So NAR has created a ton of resources. We have so many resources regarding our advocacy efforts and also education on this issue. We think that it's very important for our members and for you all to be able to continue to speak fluently on this issue, and to continue to share also with your members of Congress why this is a priority for you. And so we have really an overview of our advocacy efforts. We also have an issue brief which gets into a lot of the details with respect to a lot of the legislation and also the regulatory updates that I gave on today. So it gets into what the legislative as well as regulatory proposals have been, and then also our engagement on those. So whether we have written letters to members of Congress, whether we have written letters to various agencies, you will see all of that on the website. We also have a frequently asked questions document, and then we also have a state law independent contractor survey table where you can see what the state laws are. I've also included information here regarding NAR's legal action program, and if there are questions you may have about that, they're also here.